Hello and welcome to the Higher Enlightenment Podcast, brought to you by Higher Yields Cannabis Consulting, your seed to sale business solutions team. My name is Adam, part of the creative team here at Higher Yields, and today's episode is number 47, The Future of LED Tech and Cannabis. And our special guests today are Brian Hesterman from InSpire, Anthony Domain from Fohse, and Anthony Atkins from Higher Yields Consulting. So let's get on with the show. We'll start with the self-introductions. Have you guys introduce yourselves, tell us who you are and what you do. And so I guess I'll start with you, Anthony, number one.
Is that
Okay.
Anthony A or Anthony?
Yeah. Sorry, no offense to you.
Hey, we're both number one.
We're both number one.
Both number one.
In order of appearance.
Yes. So
Go ahead.
I'm Anthony Domain. I wear a few different hats at Fohse, as I was explaining earlier. So I'm a social media coordinator. I have my hands in a lot of the creation and filtration of our social content from a grower's perspective, because my primary background is in cultivation. And with that being said, I'm also a grower liaison. So I help our clients get dialed in with our fixtures, because prior to my work at Fohse, I used our fixtures commercially for about 2 years. So very familiar, but I love horticulture, and I've been growing for, in total, about 6 years now, all kinds of fruiting trees, veggies, herbs, cannabis, and that's pretty much my background.
Well, thank you for being here. How about you, Brian?
Hey, Brian Hesterman with InSpire Transpiration Solutions. Good to be here today. Thanks for having me. InSpire is a HVAC manufacturing representative and environmental control solutions provider focused exclusively on cannabis cultivation. That means is we work with a diverse set of manufacturers and do HVAC control integrations to ensure we bring the right environmental control solutions to each unique project. I grew up in a small town, Grass Valley, up in the foothills of California, and I've been, I was introduced to cannabis at a young age and became infatuated with it. And, over the years have consumed my fair share and grown my fair share. And it's been an amazing experience to sort of take a passion and a personal interest and be part of a business that has such a strong role, plays such a strong role in the cultivation, indoor cultivation of cannabis. And I have a small business management and entrepreneurship degree, and I've been an entrepreneur my whole career. And I've been involved with InSpire across the board, primarily on the operational and management side, but it's been amazing learning about the plant science and the HVAC engineering that go into our systems. And, as a small business, being able to sort of have my finger in lots of pots or lots of buckets makes an interesting day to day. It's something that's always changing and is always dynamic.
Thanks for being here, Brian. How about you, Anthony?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Anthony Atkins, Chief Revenue Officer at Higher Yields Consulting. My background goes deep into telecom and technology, going all the way back to the days of AT&T Global, when we were spearheading their AT&T solutions of the consulting arm into the global arena and the global market. Really had an opportunity to see a lot of different things on a global scale in terms of partnership development, market development, business development, taking over flipping teams, fixing and flipping, sales and business development teams, and creating them from scratch and understanding the importance and the complexity of technology, in the industry. But also how that transfers into, what I'm doing here with Higher Yields and the cannabis, hemp, and hopefully psychedelic industry sometime soon. And so, my role at Higher Yields is really that. I mean, it's all about the, partnership development, market development, client revenue development, really taking a look at, connecting the right resources at the right time and the right value, bringing to, those clients to elevate the game, elevate standards, and help our clients really understand the importance of our expertise, that there is an expertise involved, that have a funny quip that, YouTube is our greatest competition. Folks are, looking at YouTube and thinking they have a grow figured out, or the lighting structures figured out, or the integration of technology, in a particular environment, figured out just because they watch a YouTube video. So it's interesting. I mean, it's so dynamic and so diverse, and each project has its uniqueness to it, that we can apply formulas, and that sort of thing. So very excited to, be joining Anthony and you, Brian, on this call, on this podcast, and, excited about the discussion.
Well, thanks a lot for being here. First question for anybody who wants to chip in. It's could you give us an overview of what factors affect a grow facility's yields?
Yeah, if I can jump in first.
Sure.
There are honestly so many factors that can affect yield, because growing plants is involving so many different inputs. It involves lighting, temperature and humidity, air circulation and ventilation, nutrient concentrations, irrigation frequency and volume. So these are just a few examples of all of these growth inputs that add up to the culmination of one thing, which is yield. So ultimately, just to dive into a couple of those, lighting, the intensity and the spectrum are so important as it pertains to yield. You know, as far as intensity goes, under older systems, people are used to traditionally running lower light intensities, but with emerging research and with anecdotal evidences, we found out that cannabis can take a lot higher light intensity than we thought possible. So light intensity, through a study out of the University of Guelph, showed a linear increase with yield through 1800 micromoles, which is huge for a lot of people who are growing under HPS or CMH. They're typically capping out their light intensity levels around, anywhere from 900 to 1000 micromoles, maybe a touch more. But typically when you go above those levels, you're going to have really detrimental heat added to your canopy. So people usually don't pass that threshold, but what that means is that they're leaving a lot of weight and potentially quality on the table. So lighting is huge as it pertains to yield. Environment as well, it's going to dictate how well your plants are going to transpire and be able to regulate the flow of moisture and subsequently nutrients into the plant. And that obviously has a huge effect on yield. If your plants aren't able to transpire because your VPD is too low and the space is too humid, again, you're going to see a lot of deficiencies and signs of pH issues. So you can start to see how interwoven all of these inputs are as it pertains to yield, because yield really should be looked at as, the sum of many things. And again, I just touch on a couple more. The nutrient balance and concentration is huge for yield. Especially with increasing light intensities, it's important to increase that nutrient concentration. And additionally, the irrigation volume and frequency is so important. When plants are in veg, they prefer smaller shot sizes that are maybe more frequent and over a long period of time, as opposed to flowering plants that prefer a smaller irrigation window of maybe a few hours, maybe 2 to 3 hours of the day you're irrigating it, but it's usually with a couple very large shots. So these are some of the things that I think about as a cultivator that affect yield first and foremost.
Yeah, lots of good points there, Anthony. I'd say It's a really broad question. I think we might be able to spend the entire hour talking about just this one question. I'll try to make it as succinct as possible. I guess when I hear yields, as a businessman, I think profitability, right? And when like as with any business, companies have to focus on their profitability, and it's it's not just yields that we're talking about when it comes to profitability. It's product quality and it's cost of production. And when we look at it through that lens, the concept of law minimums come into mind. You're only as good as your weakest link, and really that starts with your facility design and your construction. Early decisions on projects can make or break the long-term profitability of these cultivation businesses. This is really where your yield potential gets set. And again, early decisions, wrong decisions can have a cascading effect all the way through to the ultimate operation of the facility and then it's too late to make changes. You're stuck with systems or processes or buildings that you've already paid lots of money for. So I think it's critical to hire a design and construction team that has experience building cultivation facilities. There's just so many pitfalls that are different building a cultivation business than a commercial and industrial type of building, all the way from power requirements to insufficient structural capacity or space for mechanical equipment. The way that these systems are designed in terms of return and supply ductwork configurations, in-room airflow, what type of systems are selected. The list goes on and on. But then with the actual operation, the equipment that you use to grow these plants, we're talking about genetics and environment. So I guess the age-old sort of formula of genetics environment equals phenotype. So genetic selection is super important, right? You could have the best building with the best equipment, and if you don't have good performing genetics, that could be your minimum, your the lowest stave in the barrel, so to speak. And so genetic selection is super important. Then you move into environment. You've got all of these parameters that impact the growth rate of a plant. You've got lighting and CO2 and humidity and temperature and airflow up above the plant or within the plant canopy, and then a whole bunch of parameters down in the root zone. And I always like to think about it as an energy balance equation. So you basically have three mechanical systems that are responsible for optimizing generally three plant processes. So you've got lighting, fertigation, and HVAC and environmental control with airflow and the way that these environmental control systems are controlled, that are responsible for optimizing photosynthesis, transpiration, and the gas exchange, or carbon assimilation within the plant, which is creating sugars and building all of the mass of those plants. And so with lighting, you're directly impacting photosynthesis, and you're also adding heat into the space. With fertigation, you're providing the plants water and nutrients, and with that water is energy as well. So you're putting lights in, you're putting heat energy in with lights, and you're putting water energy in with fertigation. And the environmental control system is responsible for removing that heat and removing the water that comes out as vapor from the surface of the leaves via transpiration to maintain those balances, right? So you've got these energy inputs, and you have to have the right amount of energy outputs, the right equipment capacity and airflow to ensure that you maintain those balances, so you can really optimize photosynthesis, transpiration, and the gas exchange within that substomatal cavity. And I guess just to tie it off, we've seen with integrated HVAC-D, the ability to deliver cool, dehumidified, CO2 enriched air into one common area within the space and then distribute it homogeneously across the plant canopy. We've seen tremendous results as opposed to a more legacy style approaches where you're cooling from mini splits and dehumidifying from pocket dehumidifiers and making, the capacity from those systems is really challenging, especially when the plant density of these spaces gets so large with vertical racked gardens. It's almost impossible to homogenize the environmental conditions in the room, let alone having the right amount of equipment capacity to maintain the balance within those spaces, especially when it comes to high PPFD lighting technology, right? Because the more light you're giving a plant, the more it's photosynthesizing, the more it's transpiring, the more you have to dehumidify, the more you have to remove water vapor from within the space to keep the plant operating at their highest levels possible.
Okay, so this is for all of you too. What are some of the technological advancements that you're most excited about right now?
Well, on our side of things, there's quite a few things actually. LEDs, we've had significant advancements as far as grow light technology in recent years. So one huge thing is spectral control. A lot of the early LEDs, like the very first ones, were laden with it's called a blurple spectrum, just a heavily red and blue mixed, cheap, compact LED. And thereafter, when growers were not really getting the results they desired, lighting manufacturers responded by creating, in my opinion, too much control by allowing growers to toggle every single wavelength of the light spectrum. So now, after years of advancement, we're finding spectrums that work well for various phases of plant growth. And at Fohse specifically, like we've developed the flagship series with 3 different spectrums that we've suited for different phases of plant life. We have just a spring, summer, and autumn. Spring being great for things like veg and early flower to help mitigate the stretch that you experience during veg and early flower, and as well as stack nodes within that shorter plant height. Summer being great for bulking or mid flower. And then we catered the autumn spectrum more so to a ripening effect for cannabis, but improved spectral control is one huge innovation in LEDs that we're super excited about, and we're excited to see where it progresses into. Additionally, higher efficiency and lower energy consumption. So we're seeing more and more efficient fixtures as time passes and technology advances. Technologies like HPS that a lot of our legacy growers are coming from are not very efficient, usually hovering around maybe a 2 micromoles per joule efficacy rating. Our fixtures are going to lean more on the 2.5 to over a 3 as far as efficacy rating. So you can see there's a huge difference in that efficiency and how much energy you're not only consuming, but you're able to use. So again, under LEDs, we have more usable PAR than these high pressure sodium situations. So you're able to produce more usable light without creating a bunch of energy and a bunch of radiant heat that you don't need. Additionally, we have a lot of advances in chip technology constantly. heat dissipation and cooling systems. So one cool thing about our fixtures is that we have these thermally conductive aircraft grade aluminum heat sinks that help dissipate heat and keep operating temperatures low and ambient temperatures low at the plant canopy. And that's huge for cannabis specifically because terpenes and all those secondary metabolites are extremely volatile, and they degrade and oxidize in the presence of heat, light, and oxygen. So we want to mitigate that as much as possible. And you know, with improving technology, we're seeing fixtures operate at cooler temperatures. Additionally, we're seeing a lot of cool research come out about UV and far red. UV, it comes in, you know, it's a little bit spliced up. You have UVA, UVB, and UVC, which all do different things on their own. And with the present research, you know, there's not necessarily established standards or recommendations for how UV should be implemented. We're very much so in an experimental stage. But some preliminary studies have shown that, you know, integrating certain types of UV at certain times or at certain frequencies during the plant life cycle can boost certain terpenes or certain responses within the plant. It can improve. UV is also really great for mitigating the proliferation of powdery mildew. So there's a lot of research and development going on, and I see the sky as the limit for LEDs, and I see, you know, the largely HID using market converting over the next 5 to 10 years entirely to LED.
Okay. What is involved in HBS replacement?
Brian, you want to speak to this first, or let me go?
Well, I mean, I could take a crack at it. I was prepared to talk about some of the technological advancements in HVAC, but if we need to
too.
If we need to move on for time, we can, no problem. I guess just a couple of things that I wanted to say, if I could. Integrated HVAC-D is still in the early stages of adoption. As mentioned previously, there are a lot of companies and growers that are still using systems that have been designed and built for human-centric comfort cooling. And to your point about standards, Anthony, or lack thereof, you know, there are these standards and sequences that have been written for human-centric comfort cooling units that basically operate air conditioners to keep people and buildings comfortable, right? And the programs on those units and on those systems are not appropriate for a process application like cannabis cultivation. And so there's a ton of progress that we're making and that we still need to make around the way HVAC units are controlled. You know, this plays out in the trends, right? So what we're trying to do is deliver tight adherence to set point for our growers. So, you know, because research shows that the tighter we can adhere to temperature and to relative humidity into those VPD set points, the more productive, the better yields, the better product quality that our growers are going to get. And a lot, like, almost invariably, we'll go into our clients' facilities or get trends from our clients' facilities, and there are, you know, poor temperature and relative humidity trends, particularly in the transitions between lights on and lights off, and then back from lights off to back to lights on. You know, there's overshooting, undershooting, frequent oscillations above and below set point, and these deviations have real impact, real tangible impact on yields and product quality. And so And I guess I would say that environmental control is kind of where LEDs were 5 years ago. That it's still really misunderstood, misapplied, and there's lots of opportunity to improve, and not just on the control side, but also on the mechanical sizing side. These human-centered comfort units are designed for cooling, not dehumidification. So most of the time there's insufficient dehumidification capacity. And then on the control, just to close the loop on the control side, providing growers sequences to effectively environmentally crop steer are some other developments that we're really excited about, to maintain our RTR, for example, help them with T diffs, whether it's to help reduce internodal stretching, or to get those anthocyanins out of the plant to get the purple colors, ramping sequences again to help with the transitions between lights on to lights off, controlling to leaf temperature measurements, actual leaf temperature measurements to control the VPD, and not having to use leaf temp offsets to manually shoot the canopy with IR guns to figure out what your leaf temp is, and what you need to control your HVAC system to really try and hit that VPD point more accurately.
Okay. And is somebody gonna
speak to the HPS replacement?
Sure.
Yeah. So HPS replacement is a process that we go through with a lot of different people who are interested in our LEDs. I would say that a lot of, like I said, our legacy growers from markets like California, Washington, a lot of the West Coast guys are still heavy into these HID systems. And, there's a lot of negatives associated. We really were using HIDs out of necessity, but technology is advanced, and there's really no reason to do that anymore comparatively. And here's why. So first, I guess high energy consumption is going to be the first thing I think about when it comes to HIDs. It's a lot of the energy you're creating is given off as heat, and that heat for few people who maybe live in extremely cold climates, that could be a benefit to you. But for the large majority of people, it's not a benefit, and it causes your AC system to basically be in overdrive. And usually that's an AC system, as Brian was saying, that was made for animal comfort. So it's not designed to do what we're trying to get it to do, especially under these HIDs. So let's see. One other sort of con with these HIDs is the limited spectrum control that they have. Usually just comes in one very like orange to red. It has some far red there, but it's one spectrum that your plants can experience while they're in flower. And I mentioned our flagship series earlier because we created that out of, our founders created that because they were previously in an HID grow, and we're looking for solutions on how do we improve plant morphology, the response that the plants are having to the lights. And one of the ways they did that again was like creating multiple spectrums. Under HPS, your plants, because of that red spectrum, are gonna stretch more and have a lot more distance as far as internodal spacing goes. Again, for a few strains, it could be used as a strategy where that's a benefit, but for a lot of people who are growing indoors, you want to be able to mitigate and control that stretch, and HPS systems don't really allow for that. HPS systems also have a really short lifespan. Most guys who've been in an HPS grow know that you're constantly changing bulbs or they're breaking. And if at best they don't do any of that, then they just don't last for very long. So your typical bulb is going to last about 10,000 hours, give or take. And, most LEDs are going to have a lifetime exceeding 50,000 hours, give or take. A lot of our fixtures are L90 rated at 40 to 50,000 hours. So still giving you 90% of the original luminous flux that you purchased at that time. So short lifespan is a real problem for these HID systems. And another thing that's a huge problem as far as yield too with HID is the insufficient distribution of that light. Most people will use reflectors and things like that to better spread the light since it's coming from that single bulb source. And really what that's going to do is, according to the inverse square law, the further you're away from the fixture, that intensity is going to decrease, and being that it's from a single source, as it spreads throughout the room, it's going to get weaker and weaker. So that's going to, again, it's going to affect photosynthesis and ultimately yield. So while it's been the go-to choice for many years, there's a ton of drawbacks when using these systems. Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. My head goes to profitability again, sort of first and foremost, and LEDs gave growers the ability to go vertical. And in my opinion, the future is multi-tier, and it's particularly important in mature markets that are experiencing supply saturation and price compression. How can you grow more cannabis, higher quality cannabis with a lower cost of production, right? You use a better spectral composition. You try to stuff more plants into the same footprint, so you have a smaller rent payment or smaller mortgage payment, right? That whole fixed cost absorption element around being more efficient, going vertical is I think a really important element. And you can't do vertically racked gardens with LEDs, and you really can't do it with conventional non-integrated HVAC either. There's new technology that is pushing the limits of production and quality while driving the cost of production down. And ultimately, cannabis cultivation is a business just like every other one. And and regardless of what market you're in, there's going to be margins are going to be squeezed eventually, and the companies that plan ahead and put these highly productive systems in are the ones that are going to win.
Well said.
Yeah, one of the things, Adam, before we go on to the next question, as you both are speaking to the technology and the integration side and that sort of thing, one of the things I'm looking at it from my perspective in terms of that business development, or how do you direct, position, message, around that, is over engineering. Have you ever seen that in your tenure, of course, in the industry? And how do you stop or encourage someone not to over engineer the environment?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great question, and something that we are acutely mindful of all the time, because when we design these systems and submit the performance for these systems to our clients, we have to make sure that we're actually achieving those numbers. But what I'd say is, our cultivators' perception of budget around environmental control systems is woefully low. It's far too low across the board, and for that reason, and knowing that they're budget sensitive, we're doing our best to try not to over engineer these systems, because when you over engineer these systems, they get they get more expensive, and all of a sudden, you know, we get laughed off of a job because, you know, they can go and buy mini splits and pocket dehues for a fraction of the price, despite the fact that they're going to get better long-term performance out of their business, and the systems that we sell them are going to be paid off. There's going to be a very quick ROI on them, but it's just like there's no vision there, there's no money there, especially right now with the macroeconomic environment being where it is. So I guess we're very mindful about not over engineering the systems just so we have shots at jobs.
Okay, for Anthony D, you have two systems, Pisces and Cobra, that can help cultivators reach new levels and yields. What makes these systems special, and can you tell us a little bit more about them?
Sure. So the Pisces and Cobra are for two different applications. The Pisces being more on the indoor, or more specifically home grow and tent grow side, and the Cobra is going to be more applicable for greenhouses. But for the Pisces, you know, we received a ton of inquiries from home growers about just a budget-friendly fixture option. So we got to work on the concept for the Pisces, and really it's a Fohse fixture stripped down to the bare necessities, that being power, efficiency, and a long lifetime. It's going to offer high light intensity options up to almost 2,500 micromoles. And with, just for perspective, for those who may not know, on a clear summer's day, the sun's given upwards of 2,200 or more micromoles. So we know cannabis can take these really high light intensities, and we wanted to be able to provide that potential at home for some of our home growers. It also has a really high efficacy rating of a 2.6 micromoles per joule, and is L90 rated at 40,000 hours. So again, at that time period of 40,000 hours, your fixture will still retain 90% of that 2,500 micromoles. So still giving you that industry leading power for years to come. And one thing too with the home grow is, I know as a home grower that sometimes, you know, life just forces you to move the home grow around, whether it's you're moving the grow specifically or you're moving your home itself. So we created the Pisces to fold in half, allowing for really easy storage and transportation. So really excited to see about what that fixture can do for the home grow market. As far as the Cobra goes, the Cobra is a bar style greenhouse fixture that can integrate real easily along the truss infrastructure of the greenhouse. We had a lot of good feedback from our other bar style fixture. It's a lower wattage, 320 watt fixture called the Pleiades. And it's really good for traditional hort applications like your vegetables and leafy greens and things that don't need, you know, maybe such high light intensity, right? But we liked the design so much, we just decided to make a higher powered version that would be applicable for cannabis greenhouse applications. So the Cobra comes in both 700 and 1,000 watt options. And again, that profile being so slim is going to limit the shadow cast to your canopy, which is huge for consistency as far as light intensity to your canopy goes. It's also pretty lightweight, so very easy to install. And both the 700 and 1,000 watt versions, they both have a 3.2 PPE, or photosynthetic photon efficacy rating, which is, you know, anything above a 3.0 is incredible. So they're very highly efficient greenhouse fixtures, and we're excited for both the Pisces and the Cobra. I think it's going to be great for cannabis growers, both at home and in the greenhouse.
Okay. For Brian, how does lighting affect the plants, their transpiration, and their yields?
Yeah, so PPFD sets the tone for these cultivation facilities, and really, so to your point, Anthony, cannabis is a unique equatorial species that can absorb a ton of light. And I think that's why companies like Fohse are pushing the envelope of these high intensity fixtures. And when you're putting this much light onto a plant, you're increasing the rate of photosynthesis. And I think back to what we were talking about earlier from a law of minimum perspective, if you're expecting to increase the photosynthetic rate of these plants, you need to expect for the transpiration rate to increase for the, right? So which would require more water, more nutrients, and more CO2 within the environment, right? So because they're going to be assimilating more carbon and building more sugars and building more biomass and flowers. So again, the lighting intensity really dictates what happens with transpiration and consequently with the yields of these plants. And so we need to really keep in mind that we have to keep in mind what type of light intensity is going into these spaces and make sure that we're engineering systems to provide sufficient cooling, sufficient dehumidification, sufficient reheat, sufficient airflow to really maintain those balances and ensure that the photosynthesis, the photosynthetic rate encouraged by the light can actually happen, right? Because if you're giving a plant a ton of light, but it doesn't have enough water or nutrients or dehumidification capacity, you could stress the plant out and it'll just shut down, regardless of how much light you're giving it.
Yeah, that's super well said. If I can piggyback, just that, one other detail to add is that genetics are going to probably be like the first limiting factor in the equation. Light intensity can affect yield in a negative way. There are cultivars out there that prefer lower intensities, whether that be that, it's a land race from a cool region, or simply that it was bred and selected under lower light intensities, likely under HPS, like a lot of our genetics have been up to this point. So it could be to the detriment or to the benefit of your crop, but it's all about growers finding out that balance and getting intimate with each cultivar and learning what are your light intensity preferences, your light intensity preferences, your spectral preferences, your nutrient concentration preferences. So just another little tidbit there on how light intensity can affect yield.
Okay, for both Anthony's, how does lighting affect the evolution and scalability of a business?
Well, these are really, really good questions because there's I can expand on them so much. So when we're considering, how quality lights can affect the ability for a business to grow, we really should, consider the following. I mean, first thing is going to be that the right grow light is going to improve your overall crop yield. More weight from the same amount of space means more money in the cultivator's pocket, which is huge. Like Brian was saying about, markets that are suffering with price compression, they're looking for ways to maximize their yield in the same space that they have, because often, they're limited on how much plant canopy they can have. So that's one aspect of it. Additionally, lighting will give you better control and flexibility over your grow, which is just going to push your production further and optimize things within the grow. The right light, it should reduce your crop loss ultimately, or the potential, increase the potential. Poor and inconsistent lighting can result in uneven plant growth, lower or inconsistent yields, and sometimes as a secondary effect, an increased susceptibility to pests and diseases becomes present because of such. So quality grow lights really provide like a stable and uniform condition, minimizing that loss. And as we touched on earlier a few times, there's an accelerated growth cycle with the right grow light. When you have these LEDs that they produce more usable light to the plant canopy, they do so at lower wattages and lower and for at a more efficient rate. This is ultimately going to speed up and improve plant growth. And that, what's entailed with that is your light spectrum and intensity, and all these things can improve the time it takes to harvest, what you're getting when you do harvest. And sometimes these faster growth cycles, when you're planning your crop cycle, this can shave time off. We've had a lot of clients in veg using our lights, and because they're doing so much more for the plants, they're like, hey man, I was vegging for 21 days. I'm down to 10-day veg now. I got to figure out what to do with these plants a lot quicker. So that's just, one case in point there of how the right light can accelerate your growth cycle and improve things there. And again, in addition to yield, it should improve product quality. The right light is going to have a spectrum that's catered to the kind of crop that you're trying to grow. In our case, talking about cannabis, one thing that we see when growers are trying to push higher light intensities is they'll see what's called photo bleaching, or it's where a certain portion of the top cola is going totally white due to the destruction of chlorophyll. Really what that is in part to is not just light intensity alone, but it's the combination of light intensity and the incorrect spectrum. So some recent research has shown us that it's the amount of red and far red combined that is what's doing this. So you'll see that fixtures that have an imbalanced spectrum, growers can't push intensity, and what does that ultimately affect? Yield at the end of the day. So with our lights, we're really proud to say that we offer growers a spectrum that's catered to cannabis, not only in veg but also in flower, and that ultimately just gives people the opportunity to push the bounds of what we once thought possible.
No, that's absolutely correct. I mean, in terms of understanding the starting point, right? Understanding the vision of what that operation or what the group, the cultivators, the operators are looking to seek to accomplish. Kind of not reverse engineering it, but scaling it all the way back or backward shaping it to location, to budget, to understanding and knowing that there is an element of education and proof of concept, in a sense, proof of development, and then allowing that to be able to expand and scale, so that any adjustments or any variables that are entered into can be mitigated, and you're mitigating that risk, protecting that investment, and kind of walking through it and developing, giving the opportunity to be considerate of the lighting mechanism, based upon canopy. Of course, everything is factored in. So it's not one thing and that's just the one thing. You adjust your lights, you have to adjust everything else. And so what I'm seeing, in terms of, the business development side is truly that. Developing a business, you're developing an operation, you want the highest yield possible. And there's going to be adjustments along the way. Not to be locked into a way of thinking, not to be locked into, so being so rigid that you can't adjust the lighting methodologies, you can't adjust the irrigation, the dehumidification, the HVAC systems that are going to be able to support that growth. So be mindful, be considerate, really taking a look at, developing that out and listening to the experts, listening to folks who have developed the technology or are utilizing and functioning and implementing that technology in order to produce the highest yield possible with the greatest outcome, greatest quality that you can go. So I know, looking at it from a the pre-project side of things, being that mindfulness, and higher yields is really focused in on that financial modeling, and taking the time and working, of course, with our partners in Fohse and InSpire, to make sure that navigating those financial models and the budget and the roadmap, in order to leave that that cushion, or the ability to pivot, the ability to make that variable change, in order to continue to scale and grow. So that, from my perspective, I think that's so important to be mindful of in the development side.
Okay, well, I think we're just about out of time. So are there any final thoughts, or would you like to plug your businesses and tell us where we get in touch with you?
I did have a final thought, just to piggyback on what Anthony was saying. One thing that you said stuck out to me, which is not having the rigidity in your mindset on making adjustments or changing your style of growing, because we run into it a ton. Like I said, we're working with a lot of like legacy guys, and guys have been doing it for 20, 30 years, and people certainly get stuck in their ways when they find a recipe that works, and to just some advice I would give to some growers who have been stuck, on old lighting technologies, but want to take a step further in their grow, is growers need to, educate yourself, because the research is out there. There's so much coming out about how LEDs can benefit cannabis production comparatively to HPS systems, and understanding the different types of grow lights available and their benefits and drawbacks is huge. Can professional guidance too, which Anthony mentioned. Sometimes you have to have the advisory of a professional, especially during the build out process, in order to mitigate these like long-term risks. Like, consult people who have done it before, and you'll be better off for it in the long run. And additionally, if you're switching to a new lighting method or using higher intensity LEDs, remember that transitioning takes time. There's a lot of variables that go into horticulture, and as you're increasing light intensity, and every strain is different as well with its preferences, you have to find out what works for each one if you're going to grow it and have that optimized in your facility. So just investment in the right technology and experimentation is so key.
Yeah, man, really well said. Continuous improvement, having that Kaizen mentality, and knowing that this is such a multidisciplinary challenge that takes lots of experts to get done right is really important. And really having a good plan before jumping in from an environmental control perspective is critical as well. Like, don't expect to increase the light intensity, or like swap out lights in your space from HPS to LED and expect the environment to be the same, or to put another tier of racks in your room and expect the same environmental control equipment that you put in previously or originally to serve that purpose, right? It's all about, it's so dynamic, and these the environmental conditions change depending on lighting, genetics, plant density, where they're at in the life cycle. You really need to think through it strategically and make sure you're bringing in experts to help you along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so good being in these conversations, of course, with both of you, Brian and Anthony. Higher Yields really relies and understands the power of an ecosystem, the power of partnership, and the power of development, and that mindfulness and consideration of our clients. The things that really, create differentiation for us as a consulting and professional services organization, is being to evaluate, is being able to bring clarity and certainty, providing those roadmaps and developmental budgets and financial modeling, really to set us apart in customization. Customization really sets us apart in collaboration, not only with our partners, but with our clients. And we found that by doing that really brings that cost control mechanism into play. Not just going to slap up and, template things out and say, oh yeah, this is what you need, right? And then, overcharge for it. The expertise, in terms of the collective, is so important to understand, because you really get into creative and innovative solutions when you bring that expertise. And we've seen a lot of things, and so we're not basing things on guesswork or hope, right? We hope it works, that sort of thing. And they say hope is not a strategy. But then, and the third thing is that phased approach. It's really that kind of slow down to go fast. It's the mentality of risk mitigation and investment protection, and always being able to, make sure that you're leaving that openness, or that, opportunity, that open-mindedness, in order to be able to adjust when need be, when the evidence appears. And so I'm very excited, of course, to, be working with you guys, and, excited about the future of the industry.
Absolutely. Well, really appreciate you having us on, me on today, and it was a lot of fun to have this conversation.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for being on. You guys are so full of information. I feel like we could go for another couple hours.
That's right.
Well,
Really appreciate it. So
yeah,
thanks
thank
so
you
much.
very much.
Yeah, thank you to Higher Yields for having us. This was an awesome talk. And just again, a little plug, if anybody is interested in Fohse LEDs, you can contact us on our website or our social media pages, and we'll get you taken care of.
Yeah, similarly with InSpire, inspire.ag is our website. We've got a great resources page. I'd point you to a couple of our webinars we did recently on mechanical systems for indoor plant environments. First, which is number 7 on our resources page, is on the plant. It's a deeper dive into the concepts that I tried to highlight today. And then number 8 is on the mechanical systems, right? How we size, design, engineer, supply, implement, and help support these mechanical systems long into the future to get better yields, higher product quality, lower cost of production.
Okay, well, thanks again. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too.
You too.
Bye-bye.